Hello and welcome. I'm Tom Copeland here to talk about reducing your risks, legal and insurance issues. I am an attorney. I have been working on the business side of family child care for many, many years. If you have questions after listening to this webinar, I'm happy to try to answer your question. Or if you have questions about other aspects of running your business, also, feel free to give me a call, send me an email. I don't charge anything for answering questions, so I'm happy to do it. Your questions might be answered on my website, tomcopelandblog.com, where I've posted hundreds of articles on all aspects of the business side of family childcare, including legal and insurance issues. I'm also on Facebook. Every time I post an article on my website, it will appear on my Facebook page, and you can ask me questions there as well. We are going to be covering a lot of ground in this class. We're going to be talking about managing the risks of running your business. We'll start by talking about some COVID-19 issues. We'll look at a self-protection checklist. Then we'll cover the most important aspects of insuring your business and your property. Then we'll talk about some custody dispute issues and privacy. Now, I'm not providing you with legal, tax, or professional advice as part of this webinar. I've written a book, Family Childcare Legal and Insurance Guide, which is available through Red Leaf Press. Let's begin by saying something about the COVID-19 issues. Can you refuse to care for a child because of COVID-19? Yes. Now, you can deny care to a child as long as it doesn't violate federal or state anti-discrimination laws, such as race, sex, religion, disability, and so on. But COVID is not a protected class. So it's not against the law to say you're not going to provide care because of this pandemic. This means you can refuse care if a parent or a child doesn't quarantine. They've told you they just traveled to Europe, to Mexico, across the state lines. They've just attended a big wedding or a big family reunion gathering. You can tell them they must quarantine. You can tell parents that they can't come to your program if they're not vaccinated. Now, parents aren't required to get a vaccine. Okay, there's no federal or state law that requires that, but you can require it before you're going to provide care for their children. And there will probably come a day, not too soon, not too far away here, where children are going to be able to get vaccinated. And when that happens, and it's widely available, you can also say you can't come here unless your child is vaccinated. It's not against the law. You can also set up your own rules. Now, you need to follow the Centers for Disease Control and the Massachusetts Health Department guidelines. You need to follow those guidelines. But you can add your own. You can say, I don't want parents dropping off or picking up their kids in my home, so I've arranged for this to happen in your garage, let's say. You could do that if you want. I've known some providers who've done that. Or parents, you got to wear masks before you're going to come into my home, and so on. So you can set your own rules. None of this would be illegal. What about a liability waiver? Some providers worry that parents might try to sue them if their child gets sick while in their program. And so some providers might think, well, let me try to protect myself by having parents sign a waiver that reads something like this. Parent promises to hold harmless the ABC Child Care Program if their child contracts the COVID-19 while enrolled in our program? Well, I just don't think that's going to work. The idea is, child gets sick, a parent sues you, and you say, oh, you can't sue me because you said you wouldn't. It's just not going to work, in my opinion. Judges, before this pandemic, were reluctant to enforce any such liability waivers because they say they don't want to allow parents to give up their rights in a situation particularly where a child has been injured. Now, how do you protect yourself here if you don't have a liability waiver? Well, clearly your duty is to keep everybody safe. And the best practice is to follow the CDC guidelines and the Massachusetts State Health Department guidelines. That's where you want to focus. You want to do that. If you're doing that, I don't see how parents could claim that you're negligent, and therefore they would have a right to sue you, because you would say, I'm doing everything the government tells me I should be doing. And you can't prevent illnesses. I mean, it's just impossible to prevent, absolutely, somebody from getting sick. And it's going to be extremely difficult for a parent to prove where their child contracted COVID. So therefore, I just don't see a liability waiver makes sense. So let's move on and talk about managing risks more broadly. As you know, when you start caring for young children in your home, the risks go up of something bad happening. I mean, it's just inevitable. We know that. And here are some real situations in family childcare. An infant is scratched by a child, and an infant is scratched by a cat, and the insurance company pays out $5,000. A tornado in Minnesota destroyed a provider's home and everything in it. And the provider only got $2,000 for everything in her home because she didn't have the proper homeowner's insurance. In Connecticut, a child died in a family childcare home of SIDS. The provider saw the baby on her stomach, but didn't do anything. And the court awarded the parent $800,000. The judge said, as a family childcare provider, you had a higher duty of care. You are a mandated reporter. She was trained in SIDS. She saw the baby at risk and didn't do anything. Car accident. Another case in Minnesota, a provider got into a van with 4 children, drove down the freeway. The van caught fire, and 2 of the children died. This provider is in serious financial trouble because she did not have the proper car insurance. So these are the horror stories. It's like, yikes. Bad things can happen. So we need to protect ourselves. How do we do that? We can't eliminate all the risks associated with caring for children. It's just impossible. But you can manage them. We can reduce these risks so that you can sleep at night. So, for small risks, we're going to talk about following some common sense policies. And for the larger risks, we'll talk about the key insurance policies you need to have to protect yourself. So, although insurance can be scary and these risks can be scary, we want to assure you here, by the time we get through with this, you'll realize, okay, I understand what I need to do. You can do it so that you can take care of this. Self-protection checklist. It starts, obviously, with maintaining a safe home. Licensing helps you reduce risks because you're required to follow certain health and safety policies. And by following your licensing rules, that reduces your risks. In other words, if a child falls down, the most common accident for a child in childcare is a child falling down. All right? It happens. So a child falls down in your program. Okay, but you're in compliance with licensing rules, and so your risk is lower than if a child fell down and at the time you were over enrolled in violation of licensing rules. Now your risk is higher. Now you're in trouble with licensing, and now parents have a stronger claim against you because you were in violation of licensing rules. So you want to make sure to start with, obviously, that you're following all licensing rules. Follow your own policies. It's better not to have a policy than to have a policy you don't follow. So if you're in violation of your own rules, that increases your risks. Here's what I mean. Let's say your policy was, if parents don't show up in the morning within 30 minutes of their drop-off time, you will call them to find out what's going on. All right? That might be a policy. Well, we got a problem here. What if you're not consistently calling parents when they are 30 minutes late? And let's say one day when you don't call the parent forgot the child was in her car. She thought she dropped the child off at your program, but instead went to work, left the child in the car because she didn't realize the child was there, and the child was injured or died. The parent could sue you to say, you didn't follow your rules because you didn't call me. And if you had called me, this wouldn't have happened. And so somehow, in some way, you are somewhat responsible. See? How is that going to end up? I don't know. But you just don't want to put yourself in that situation where a parent getting very angry with you because you're not following your policies, or something happened to their child because you didn't. So watch out. If you're going to have a policy, you better follow it. And I don't like a policy that says you're going to call a parent if they're not dropping off on time. That's too much responsibility for you, I think. I think that goes above and beyond what you need to be doing to run a business. Screen parents before enrollment. You want the relationship with you and the child and the parents to be a good one, a long-lasting one. So you don't want to take on a family that's out of control, their child is out of control, the parent is going to just be totally uncooperative and complaining all the time and making complaints to licensing and threatening you, all that bad stuff. Obviously, you want to avoid that. So do the best you can to be careful, to screen parents, to ask them a lot of questions, to ask for a reference. Who's the previous caregiver? So that you can get some idea of whether or not there are going to be any serious problems with the parent or the child. You're not required to accept every parent who wants to enroll in your program. Communicate clearly with parents. Okay, you've enrolled the family. You want to make sure that you're aware of any concerns they have before they get any larger. So, on a regular basis, you want to be talking to the parents along the lines of, how are things going? Do you have any concerns? Do you have any complaints? What could I do to make my program better for your child? You want to give parents the opportunity to give you feedback. You don't want to be surprised when a parent makes a complaint to licensing. Or you don't want to be surprised if a parent comes to you and says, I've had enough. I'm fed up with all this stuff. I'm out of here. I'm very upset. I'm going to make a complaint. I'm going to tell everybody else you're a terrible provider, whatever. So, I assume everybody's doing a pretty good job of this, but just keep on top of it. Parents, how is it going? Do you have any concerns? Do you have any complaints? Let me know. Always come and talk to me if you have any concerns. Communicate clearly with your licensor. You want your licensor to know ahead of time if there are any serious issues with a parent, so that if a parent ever does complain to licensing, they'll have already heard from you first. In other words, if you're just in a conflict with a parent and they're complaining about something, tell your licensor. The parent is threatening you. Oh, I'm going to do this if you don't do that. I'm going to sue you. I'm going to complain to licensing. I'm going to call child protection, whatever. Or the parent is leaving owing you money, or they're just a problem, a conflict. You want to talk to your licensor and say, I just want to let you know, please make a note of our conversation that Mrs. So-and-so over here has been very upset. I don't know what she's going to do. I'm trying to work it out. You're not calling to try to get the licensor to help you solve the problem. You just want to put them on notice that Mrs. So-and-so has left owing you money, has threatened you, has made a serious complaint about it, and so the licensor knows what's going on. I've talked to licensors who said to me that if they've heard from the provider first about a problem they're having with a parent, and then the parent complains to them, they're in a better position to be supportive of the provider because they understand a little bit more about what's really going on. So don't hesitate to just keep your licensor informed of any serious concerns you have about a parent. Lastly, screen and monitor employees. You are responsible for anything that happens to your employee by your employee. In other words, you're in one room with some kids, your employee's in another room, let's say with some kids, and a child falls down and is injured in the room where the employee is. Well, you're responsible. So if the parent thinks that the employee did something that caused this child to be injured, or if that employee did do something that the employee accidentally dropped the child and the child was injured, the parent's going to sue you because you're responsible. So you need to make sure you're doing everything you can to minimize the risks associated with having an employee. That starts with following the federal and state payroll tax withholding tax rules, withholding Social Security tax, paying federal and state unemployment tax, and most importantly, purchasing workers' compensation insurance. If you've got somebody who's helping you care for children, they are an employee, regardless of how little you pay them. Now, the only exception to this would be if somebody's not really caring for children, but are providing an activity. They're a music teacher, they're a swimming instructor, they're doing a puppet show, or they're self-employed in the business of providing substitute care, meaning they work for other providers. They have a business name. They've registered that name with the state. They have their own contract. That's what they are, Sally's Substitute Service. All right? So then that person and the puppet show person and the music teacher, those are independent contractors. And we don't have to worry so much about liability associated with them. They need to have their own insurance. But you have an employee, okay, workers' compensation insurance. What that does is protect you and the employee. So if the employee is injured, this insurance protects them and the employee cannot sue you for any injury they suffer while working for you. And if you don't have this insurance and this person is helping you care for children and they get injured, you're going to have to pay their entire medical bill, plus severe penalties for not having this insurance. So that's a big deal. What else? When you have an employee, you want to have business liability insurance, which we'll talk about later, which would include coverage for an employee. In other words, parent sues you because the employee did something, your insurance protects you for whatever acts conducted by your employee. And of course, you want to be careful about hiring, training, monitoring your employees. Are you hiring somebody who's responsible, doing a background check on them? Are you giving them proper training, particularly in health and safety issues? And are you monitoring them? Are you doing evaluations? Are you checking in on a regular basis, at least once or twice a year at least, saying, all right, let's see how well you're doing and get feedback from parents and just keep on top of what they're doing. Because again, you're responsible. Child abuse. Wow, nobody wants to hear about child abuse. But as you all know, you're a mandated reporter. You need to protect children. That's your primary responsibility. So you need to make sure you understand the scope of that responsibility. You've got to report a child at risk. And if you're not sure, you should report it. In other words, here's my example. A provider calls me and says, the mother has just called me to say that the father is going to pick up the child, but the mother's now saying the father doesn't have a driver's license because he has a DUI. He was arrested while driving under the influence. And so the provider says to me, well, this father's going to show up. What should I do? And I'd never had that question before. And I thought, I don't know. I don't know. Is this child at risk if they get into a car with a person who doesn't have a driver's license? So I thought, I don't know. So I called Child Protection and I said, what about this? Is this something the provider should be reporting? And the answer was yes. I had no idea. Okay, yes. So provider, you got to report it. So you might be faced with situations, maybe in the past, maybe thinking ahead now of, well, should I report this? Don't hesitate to ask. If you're thinking about situations that might happen in the future or that have happened in the past and you're afraid might happen again, call Child Protection. You don't have to give your name. Just say, I'm a child care provider. Here's a situation. Here's 3 situations. Is it something I should report? Here's another example. Provider said, a parent lives close by, and on Saturdays, she drives by my house in a truck, and the kids are in the back of the truck. And she says, I'm nervous about that. Now, it's not, well, the children are in her care, but she's wondering, wow, this is not safe. Should I report it? So I said, find out. You need to find out. This is obviously serious stuff. You are not going to be in trouble by asking questions ahead of time about these kinds of situations. All right, so insurance. Everybody's excited about insurance, so let's talk about it. First, we want to discuss homeowners insurance. Now, a homeowners insurance policy, let's imagine for a moment you're not doing childcare. Your normal, everyday homeowners insurance is covering 3 basic things. It covers your house. So if your house is damaged or your house is destroyed, your insurance will pay for the repairs or get you a new house. It covers property, the contents, the stuff you brought into your home, furniture, appliances, all your personal stuff, everything you owned inside your house, the contents. And it covers some limited personal liability protection. So a neighbor comes over to your house and falls off your back deck and breaks their arm. Your homeowners is going to provide some medical coverage for that. So that's your typical homeowner's policy. Now we got to watch out. Now you're doing childcare in your home. If you rent, we're going to pick that up when we talk about renter's insurance. But let's say you're a homeowner. Well, some homeowners' policies will say no business covered, meaning your house burns down, we're not going to give you a penny. We had that situation in Minnesota where a provider had hail damage on her roof. And the contractors were up on the roof fixing the roof, and they saw a sign in her window that said daycare. And they told the insurance company. And the insurance company told the provider, we don't cover for hail damage. We told the contractors to stop fixing your roof. And by the way, you made a claim last year. And now that we know that you do childcare, we want our money back. Yikes. Now that's not common, but it does exist. Other policies might say, daycare only covered up to, say, 4 children. All right? Well, you got 2, 3, 4 children, you're okay, you're still covered. But you got 5 children, now you got a problem. So we got to watch out for that. More typically, a policy will say the contents in your home that are business property are only covered up to $2,000. That's pretty common. In other words, any property that's business property that's more than $2,000 is not covered. Wow. And so that's a concern. And it's not going to provide any protection for injuries for children. So a child falls off the deck, your homeowners is not going to cover you. A provider called me up once and said a parent on her first day walked up to my front steps, slipped and fell on the ice and broke both wrists in 2 places. And she calls me up and I said, your homeowner's insurance is not going to cover you. It's not going to offer you any protection. And then we had a discussion about liability insurance, which we'll get to in a minute. So your homeowners in general is somewhat limited in terms of now what it's covering you for. Your policy didn't change, but now it's not perhaps covering you as much as it did before you provided childcare. And unfortunately, many providers are not aware of this. So, what are we going to do about this? You need to talk to your homeowner's insurance agent. You need to say, I'm a childcare provider. Maybe you already knew that, but I'm calling you again. I'm a childcare provider and I'm caring for 2, 3, 4, 6, 8 kids, however many you're licensed for. So, agent, is my home covered? If my house burns down, will my policy cover me in my situation? Next, what about the contents? And I would use the example of a washer and dryer, not a swing set, something that's you would think of as personal. So you'd say, if my washer and dryer are destroyed in a fire, in a flood, or whatever, does my policy cover me? Now, if your agent says, yes, you're covered, you say, terrific. Put it in writing. If your agent says, well, your house is covered, but the contents are only covered up to $2,000, then the next option is to get what's called business property insurance to cover your business property. Now, here's the thing. What is business property? What's this $2,000 going to cover you for? It's what the company thinks is business property. And some insurance companies will say any property that's used in a business is business property. So therefore, your washer and dryer would be considered business property, as would virtually everything else in your home. That's why this provider in Minnesota, when the tornado destroyed everything in her home, the company said, well, everything in your home was business, and therefore we're only giving you $2,000. And I talked to that person's insurance agent who said, I had talked to this provider a few months before this happened and said you need business property insurance. And the provider didn't want to do it. The cost of business property insurance is pretty low. Probably $100 a year, I don't know, something like that. Not a lot of money. Now, if you're a renter, the same idea is you want to make sure your property, your furniture, whatever you brought into the apartment or the house is still covered under your renter's insurance. So same thing. Am I covered? Yes. Okay. Put it in writing. Now, one other thing about this. I have talked about this over the years, and I occasionally will get a call from a provider who will say, Tom, I did what you said. I called the agent. I said, am I covered for my house? Yes. Am I covered for the contents? Yes. And then I said, okay, I need to say it in writing. And the insurance agent said, okay, I'll get back to you. Because the insurance agent is not going to just put it in writing without checking with the company. Because whatever the insurance agent puts in writing, they are responsible for. So the provider says, okay, the insurance agent gets back to me and says, well, the insurance company says you're not covered. We hadn't thought about it before, or we changed the rule, or whatever, and now you're not covered. So you got to watch out. Insurance policies can certainly change from year to year. When you get your new policy and you get all that paperwork, do you read your insurance policy and all the changes and updates every year? I don't. Is it possible that maybe you were covered last year, but you're not covered this year? Yeah, it's possible. And if you think about all the natural disasters in this country, fires, floods, tornadoes, etc., it's not unrealistic to think that insurance companies might be looking for ways to reduce their exposure and therefore to say, we're not going to provide the similar coverage that we did before to a family child care provider. So every year, you need to be on top of it. You need to be on top of it. And ask your agent every year, I need to see this in writing. This is a big deal. All right. So now let's talk about liability insurance. Up till now, we've been just talking about property. Your home, the contents in your home. Is that property protected? And how you need to make sure it is. Now, we have to be concerned about a lawsuit, a parent suing you because of something happening to their child or to them. Therefore, you need business liability insurance. It's a cost of doing business. You shouldn't be operating without it. I hope you already have it. Telling parents you don't have insurance won't protect you later. A provider once said to me, I told the parent I didn't have liability insurance. I gave them a signed letter that said I did not have insurance and you know about it. And they signed off, yes, I know you don't have insurance. And then their child got injured and the parent said, well, I expect you to pay for it. And the provider said, well, but you knew I didn't have insurance. Well, it doesn't matter. The parent can still sue you, even though they know you don't have insurance. If you're not licensed, you can't even get the insurance. That's one of the benefits of being licensed, is telling parents, look, I have liability insurance. And so you need to know that if you're going to choose somebody who's not licensed, they're not going to have this kind of insurance. Homeowners' policies tend to look the same in terms of what they cover. Liability insurance policies, however, can differ, and they can differ a lot. And the coverages you need to look at closely. So, here's some key things. You want a policy that's professional liability, meaning if you fail to supervise a child, this policy will cover you. That's different than general liability. And general liability means, well, if you were asleep and the child wandered out into the street and got hit by a car and you only had general liability, you probably wouldn't be covered. Legal defense in excess of policy limits. What does that mean? One of the main benefits of having liability insurance is this. Something happens. We're trying to get this insurance to cover the major problem, a serious injury of a child, death of a child. What happens? A parent sues you. They hire a lawyer to sue you. If you have insurance, you contact your insurance agent. The insurance company will hire a lawyer to defend you. And the two lawyers go after it, and maybe you're responsible, maybe you're not. Insurance company decides, are they going to pay something? Or are they going to be more involved and go to court to get it resolved? But in the end, it gets resolved. And your insurance essentially covers you. All right? At the end of that, however, that lawyer has spent a bunch of time, and it costs a lot. Tens of thousands of dollars, let's say it could be, for that lawyer's fees. You want a policy in which those fees are paid by the insurance company, and that those fees do not come out of the policy limits of your policy. So if you have a $600,000 policy and the lawyer's fees are $80,000, you don't want your $600,000 reduced by $80,000 so that there's less money available to the parent. You want the insurance company to pay for the lawyer. That means that your policy covers legal defense in excess of the policy limits. The policy limits are still going to remain the same. You want some child abuse coverage that would protect you and any accusations about other family members of yours. Accidental medical. Some policies will say, if a child is injured, send us the bill. The emergency room bill, the doctor's bill. Send us the bill right away, and we'll pay it. And that's good because now the parent doesn't have to worry about medical expenses or going to their insurance, and maybe that will reduce the chances that the parent will try to sue you for something more, pain and suffering. Other policies will say, well, wait to see if the parent's insurance will pay, and if the parent's insurance won't pay, then we will come in and pay. And not as good, I don't think, because now the parent might be more upset because they have to wait longer before this gets resolved. Who's paying for it? And that might make them more upset about trying to sue you for more money. So that's a difference in what policies can or cannot cover. Accidents away from home is obvious, but not all insurance policies will cover you if you're in the park and the child falls down and breaks their arm. Lastly, occurrence versus claims made. What's the difference? Most policies are occurrence policies. That's the word you want to look for or ask about. A few, some, are claims made. What's the difference? Years ago, I got a call from a provider who said, I was doing childcare a long time ago. 15 years ago, in fact, a child was seriously injured in my program. Child went to the hospital, came out of the hospital. I provided care for another year. I moved to another town. I did care for another year or two. Then I quit. I haven't done childcare for 9 or 10 years. I just got a letter from that child, who's now 18, suing me for the injury the child suffered when the child was 3. Wow. Now, what are you going to do? So I said, well, did you have insurance back then? And she said, no. So I said, well, now you need to hire a lawyer to defend yourself. That's one reason, another example of why you want liability insurance. But here's the deal. If you have an occurrence policy, and let's say she had an occurrence policy back then, it would have covered her, because an occurrence policy says If an injury happens while you have insurance with us, we will cover you even if we're sued later when you don't have insurance with us. A claims-made policy says we will only cover you if you are sued and we have a policy with you at that time. So if years later you're out of business or with another insurance company and you're sued, we don't cover you because you didn't have our policy when you were sued, which is no good. So you always want to look for occurrence coverage. Okay, well, how much insurance should you get? The short answer is, well, as much as you can afford. Even a little bit of insurance is better than no insurance. Each insurance policy will have two different coverage amounts, a per occurrence amount and an aggregate amount. What does that mean? Per occurrence means how much will the policy pay for any one particular incident. Child falls down, that's an incident. There's a maximum amount we're going to cover for that. The aggregate coverage says this is the maximum amount we will pay over the course of the coverage of our policy, which is 1 year. So if you have 2 or 3 incidents, we're not going to pay out more than a total of this aggregate amount. Well, you can get, so you always see 2 numbers, so much per occurrence, so much aggregate. And you can get varying amounts of coverage. So a per occurrence, maybe the smallest amount maybe you could get is 200,000 or 300,000 up to maybe $1 million. And the aggregate coverage starts as small as maybe 300,000 up to 2 to 3 million, right? So ideally, you want $1 million, 2 million. Why? The difference in cost between less coverage and the maximum coverage is relatively small. A provider once called me from New York and said, I'm suffering financially. I'm trying to find out ways to save money. I have the maximum coverage in my liability policy. How much could I save if I didn't get the maximum coverage? And I thought, well, that's an interesting question. So I called up the insurance company, you know, not sharing her name, but just said, what's the difference in price between the lowest amount of coverage and the highest amount of coverage? And the lowest amount of aggregate coverage was 300,000 and the maximum was 200,000. And I said, what's the difference in price? And they said about $87 a year. Now that was a few years ago, but still, when you're renewing your insurance policy or buying liability insurance for the first time, look at the difference in cost between the cheapest and the most expensive, or between what you have and the most coverage you can get, because it's probably not that much. And, you know, for an extra $1 million of coverage to pay $100 or a little bit more than that in a year, that is not bad. That is really cheap coverage. So I would encourage you to look at the higher end of coverage amounts. Now, when COVID hit, insurance companies quickly scrambled to provide an exclusion for coverage for legal defense if you were sued because of COVID. Oh man. So probably every policy that you can try to get out there will have this communicable disease exclusion, which simply means child is injured, gets sick, parent sues you, your insurance will not defend you in that situation. So, but as I said before, I just don't think this is going to be an issue because of the inability of the parent to try to prove that the child was injured in your program, and that they're not going to be able to show that you're negligent as long as you're doing what you should be doing, following the CDC guidelines and the Massachusetts Health Department guidelines. All right, the last significant insurance we're going to talk about. Vehicle insurance. The most significant financial risk you can take is to get into a car with children, because of the potential risk that multiple people can get injured, property damage, multiple lawsuits. Wow. And the example that I mentioned at the beginning of this provider who had 2 children die in a van fire, she's not doing childcare anymore. She did not have adequate vehicle insurance. She has hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of claims hanging over her head. Judges have awarded parents a lot of money. She doesn't have it, but she has this debt hanging over her. So that's an extreme bad example, but it can happen. So what are you going to do? The same issue here with homeowners. All right, you have car insurance. All right, but now we need to know, does it still cover you in your current situation? You need to call up your insurance agent and say, I just want to make sure I'm covered. I want to let you know how I'm using my car for my business. I'm transporting children every day, once a day, once a week, 5 times in the summer. Never. I'm also going to the bank once a week. I'm going to the grocery store twice a week. I'm going to training classes. I'm doing this, I'm doing that, using my car. You want to tell them everything. And then the question is, are you using your car only occasionally for your business? Or are you using it regularly for your business? Because that'll make a difference. And it's up to the insurance company to tell you where you fall. It's not what you think, it's what they think. That's why you want to tell them everything. So they might say, well, you're not transporting children and you're only using your car for, okay, what you've described as, and we think that's just occasional use. Therefore, your current car insurance is still valid. You're in good shape. And if that's the case, you want to say, great, put it in writing that I'm covered, even though I'm a childcare provider. Or they might say, well, now we believe you're using your car on a regular basis for business. And if you're transporting children at all, there's a high likelihood that they'll say you're using your vehicle on a regular basis. And if that's the case, they're going to say either now you need commercial insurance, and that will cost you more money, or we don't provide that kind of insurance. We don't offer commercial insurance, so therefore we're canceling you. Now, if you're nervous about finding this out, holy cow, I don't want to be canceled. And in the same way, you might be nervous about finding out whether or not your homeowner's policy will cover you, because you don't want to get canceled there. You don't want to, you don't want to get into trouble. So what can you do? You don't want to put your head in the sand. You don't want to just say, oh boy, I hope they don't find out. Maybe if I just don't tell them, I'll be okay. Well, no, of course not. The worst thing that can happen is you have a fire, your house burns down, or you're in a big car accident, and now you find out your policy doesn't cover you. Wow, that is not the time to find that out, or that is not the time to have to fight with your insurance company to make sure you do get covered. So, if you're nervous about this, what can you do? Well, pick a different agent from the same company and call that person up. In other words, let's say you have State Farm car insurance. I don't know. So call a different State Farm agent in the town next to yours and say, I'm thinking about becoming a family child care provider. And this is how I think I'm going to be using my car for my business. And you describe exactly what you do. And then say, would your insurance cover me if I'm using my vehicle in this manner? No. Then, okay, now you know. Now you need to shop around immediately. And if they say yes, then you say, okay, now you can feel comfortable talking to your own agent. You don't want to let this go by. You absolutely need to see if you're covered. Now here's an upbeat example. I used to work at a childcare agency. And then my wife and I moved 5 miles further away from where I worked. So I called up my car insurance agent. I said, okay, I'm now commuting 10 miles longer each day to work. So I want to know, I just want to make sure my policies still cover me because you need to know this. And then I said, well, by the way, now that I think about it, I'm also driving around the state doing training workshops as part of my job. And so I want to make sure I'm covered when I'm on the road for those training workshops. And the agent said, okay, I'll call you back. And he calls me back and he says, okay, everybody gets rated as to where they fall into coverage. And he said, your car insurance will go down. And I said, well, how can that be? That doesn't make sense. And he said, according to accident records, people who commute to work and don't use their vehicle for other business purposes are at a higher risk. They're in more accidents than people who commute and use their car for business purposes. Who knew? I had no idea. So great news for me. As I said, and I want to repeat this, you want to get coverage in writing. You tell me I'm covered, I'm very happy. Now I want you to put it in writing. Some providers, when they find out the cost of commercial insurance or that they realize they could get canceled, will decide not to transport children because that's the biggest factor that would determine whether you need commercial insurance. And these providers will hire a transportation company if they do need to transport kids, and they find that that's cheaper than purchasing the insurance for themselves. So you never want to get into a car with children unless you know in writing that you are covered. A few other things about the use of vehicles. You never want to charge parents to transport their children. $5 a week to take your child to the park every other week. $10 a week to transport your children every day to and from school or whatever. No. If you charge a fee, a transportation fee, you're going to need a commercial driver's license, as well as need to have commercial car insurance. And getting a commercial driver's license can be expensive. No. The simpler way to go is just include the price of any transportation as part of a regular fee. So it's not a separate fee. So parents, your rates were $200 a week and now it's $230 a week or $210 a week or whatever. And it includes transportation, but you're never charging for it separately. Next, let's say you have a bunch of kids. They can't all fit in your car or van, and so you're having parents help you out, and they are transporting some of the kids to the park or wherever you're going. Okay. The driver of the car, their insurance protects them and the vehicle and any accidents that happen. And they don't need any commercial insurance or anything because they're not in the business of transporting kids. So it's the parents' insurance that will cover. So that's good. But of course you need parent permission. You need to make sure everybody's okay. Parent gives permission for their child to be transported by Mrs. Jones over there. And whoever's driving those kids, you want to see proof that that parent does have insurance because you don't want to mess around with parents worried about trying to collect, get their child protected and have to run around and go after a parent who doesn't have insurance. Lastly, if you have an employee and your employee is transporting children, or your employee is driving their car for errands for you, they're using their car for your at your direction, then again, it's their car insurance that will cover them, and they need to talk to their agent to make sure they are still covered. And if you want, you could get what's called hired and non-owned liability coverage, which means if there is an accident in the employee's car with a child, the parent could easily sue you, because again, you're responsible for whatever the employee does. So they're going to sue you. Now you have this kind of insurance that protects you in that situation. Talk to your business liability insurance agent and car insurance agent about this. All right. So that's the insurance, homeowners, business liability, vehicle insurance. All right. Nobody likes paying for insurance. You don't get excited when you write out a premium check for insurance. And so, people look for reasons, excuses not to get the insurance. So, somebody might say, well, I don't have any money. So why should I worry about a parent suing me? Well, so you think about the van fire, and this provider didn't have any money, but what happens? What happens? The parent sues you for, I don't know what, $400,000. You don't have $400,000. You don't have liability insurance. You don't have $40,000. Now what? Depending on the state rules, the parent could put a lien on your house. So whenever you sell the house, they're going to get a bunch of money. Or if you get an inheritance, that could be taken away. Or they could force you to sell your boat, your third car, your summer vacation house, your oil paintings, some of your jewelry, some of your stuff to satisfy some of what you owe the parent. So you're not off the hook. And this claim could hang over your head for decades. So just because you don't have any money now doesn't mean you still can't be hurt. You might say, well, I never had an accident. Well, most of the calls I get from providers, they're saying, yeah, and this has never happened before. The provider whose parent slipped and fell on front steps and the parent broke her wrist, she'd been in business for 25 years and nothing had ever happened like that before. Of course not. But when it happens, and you got to deal with it. And this provider said, well, the parent has just told me she doesn't have health insurance. And I said to the provider, well, your homeowners is not going to cover you. Do you have liability insurance? And I held my breath, and she said, no. I said, wow. Well, you better hope that the parent somehow gets some kind of coverage for her medical bills, but if not, and she comes after you, you're going to have to pay them because you're responsible. What else? I can't be sued for more than my coverage, so why buy more than my bare minimum? Again, you've got a low amount of business liability insurance. Maybe you got $600,000 of aggregate liability insurance, and a parent sues you for $800,000, like in Connecticut. All right? The insurance company pays out to $600,000. That's the maximum they're going to pay. And now they're canceling you. Once they pay it out and pay the maximum amount, they're going to cancel your policy. And once that happens, it's going to be extremely difficult to find insurance from somebody else. And if you do, it's going to cost a lot more. But what else? The parent won an award of $800,000, and they only got $600,000. So again, the $200,000, you still owe them now. And they can put a lien on your house and so on. So that's not a reason to get a small amount of coverage. And lastly, well, my parents signed a liability waiver, so I don't have to worry about this. No, you do have to worry about it. A liability waiver doesn't protect you from COVID, as I've said. It does not protect you if a child is injured. It just doesn't. What about finding insurance? Well, I have an insurance directory at tomcopelandblog.com where you might find a company that can help. If not, Google independent insurance agent and the name of your town. An independent insurance agent is someone who does not work for any one insurance company. And they will shop around and contact all the places they know about to see if a company out there will provide insurance for you. You could also talk to other people, talk to other providers. Who do you have insurance with? Do you use a tax preparer? Do they know of insurance agents? Child Care Resource and Referral Agencies, do they know of anybody? Your existing agent, if you have vehicle insurance, does that person offer liability insurance? Or do they know of somebody that offers liability insurance? Lastly, if you're just running out of luck, for some reason you can't find anything, then talk to your state insurance commissioner's office. Your state insurance commissioner's office and say, I'm a child care provider, I cannot find insurance for my house or my car or for my business. They are likely to refer you to what's called a secondary market. That is, insurance companies that issue policies for people who can't otherwise get it. It's usually not as good a coverage, but it's better than nothing. And so that's a last resort. You should be able to get coverage through your state insurance commissioner's office. They can refer you to some companies in that situation. Now, your insurance agent is your friend. Much like I've said, tell your licensor what's going on. For sure, tell your insurance agent what's going on. Report all accidents, incidents. This helps you. This helps you. How so? A child is injured. Okay, you fill out a report. You tell your licensor. Maybe everything is okay, fine, nothing else happens. Maybe there's some complications down the road. We don't know. You don't know. You want to tell your insurance agent. Why? Depending on the circumstances, they may want to do their own investigation. And they may want to interview the parent or interview other parents, or they may want to gather facts so that if later child needs a second operation and now the parent wants to sue you and it's been 6 months or a year, the insurance company already has gathered some information at the time and they're in a better position to defend you, and that's what you want. So tell your insurance agent, look, what kind of incidents, accidents do you want to know about? Do you want to know about everything I have to report to licensing? I would hope they would. Or do you want to know about other things? What do you want to know? You want to keep your licensor informed of changes, right? You got married, you got divorced, you have a new child, you bought a new home, you bought a new car, obviously. But what else? You changed your hours. You're providing care now on Saturdays or later in the evening. Why is this a big deal? Or now you allow one parent to drop off earlier. Your operating hours haven't changed, but now you got one parent who, yeah, you can come a half hour early. That's okay. Here's the deal. If the child is injured during that first half hour or on Saturday, and your liability insurance agent doesn't know this, your policy may not cover you, because at the time you originally purchased the policy, you were probably asked when you provided care. So when these things change, boy, you better make sure they're on top of it so that you're not going to have to worry about not being covered. What else? The more the agent knows about you and your circumstances and things that have changed and things that have happened, the better position they are in to be your advocate. In other words, parent sues you for money, for medical bills or whatever. You're telling your agent. Your agent is then taking that parent claim or that parent lawsuit to the insurance company for the insurance company to deal with it. When the insurance agent knows everything about your situation, they are in a strong position to say to the insurance company, yeah, I knew about this. We knew about that the provider was doing this and working longer hours or doing this or doing that. We knew about it, and so therefore this claim should be processed and paid out. But if the agent is saying to you, wow, I didn't know this, you didn't tell me that, they are in a weaker position, and the insurance company is in a weaker position to defend you. Your insurance agent is your buddy. Well, what about deducting insurance costs? Your homeowner's insurance, or if you have renter's insurance, you can deduct the business portion of that, or we call the time and space percentage of that is deductible. If you have business property insurance or business liability insurance, you can deduct 100% of those premiums. And so what that means is, you're buying business liability insurance. Oh man, it's going to cost me another $100 if I up the coverage. Well, for every $100, you're going to save about $30 to $40 on your taxes because you're in a higher tax bracket, and every deduction will significantly reduce your taxes by about 30 to 40%. Again, for every $100 that you spend on insurance, liability insurance, it's really only costing you $60 to $70. So it's not as expensive as you might think. Car insurance. Well, you can only deduct part of car insurance if you're using what's called the actual expenses method to claim car expenses, rather than using the standard mileage method. So some of the costs, but only if you're claiming gas, oil, repairs, and other actual expenses. That's insurance. What a relief. Now let's talk about custody issues. Biological parents have equal rights to their child until a court takes them away. One parent cannot limit the rights of another. So, the mother calls you up and says, Father, we're having conflict, we're about to get divorced, or we're separated now, or I don't like him anymore, or he's going to kidnap the child, or whatever she says, and therefore I don't want you to allow him to pick up our child today. No, you can't agree to that. She can't deny the father to be able to pick up. Let's say the mother signed all the paperwork when she enrolled the child, and the father didn't sign anything. And the mother does not put the father on the pickup list. He's not on the list to pick up the child. Well, as long as you know that he's the father, he gets to pick up, whether or not he's on the pickup list. He has the right to the child, unless the court takes away his rights. So let's talk about what rights we mean. There's legal custody. Legal custody says who has the power to make a decision about the child's health and welfare, which includes the right to enroll the child in care. Both parents who might have legal custody, they both can have to be in agreement on this. Physical custody. Who lives with the child? Who's responsible for food, clothing, shelter? So, one parent could have full legal custody. One parent could have full physical custody. Or there could be joint custody. Each parent has some legal custody or some physical custody. It's a sharing. So, you need to know, when a parent, a single parent, divorced parent, says, I want to enroll my child, and you say, great, you need to ask, well, who has legal custody? Who has physical custody? And if the mother says, oh, that's me, I've got full legal and physical custody, you say, okay, terrific. I need a copy of the court order that says that. You need that in your files, because you need to follow whatever that says. And if the parent says, well, okay, okay, but I forget, or I'll get it to you next week or next month, or you don't get it, again, you would say to the parent, if I know who the father is, he gets the child. Oh, no, 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 I have full custody. Well, okay, but until I see the court document, I cannot prevent the father from taking the child. Now, if the parents are unmarried or never been married, Massachusetts law automatically gives the rights to the mother. Okay, so now what? Let's say there's shared physical custody, and the father has the right to pick up the child on Tuesdays and Fridays. Fine. He shows up on Tuesday, great. He's following the court order. You know that that's correct, so no problem. But one day he shows up on Wednesday and says, well, the mother told me to pick up the child today. I'm in kind of a hurry, so I'm taking the child. You would say, well, wait a minute. The mother didn't contact me. I haven't heard about this. So hold on, have a seat. Let me call and get a hold of the mother. No, I'm in a hurry. I need to go. And you say, well, no. If you do, I'm going to have to call the police. I'm going to call 911 because I don't know that you do have the right to take the child today. Well, the mother said it was okay. Yeah, but I haven't heard from the mother. All right? You really got to do that. Now, the mother can give the father permission to pick up on Wednesday, just like the father could give the mother permission to pick up on Tuesday. They can switch and give permissions if they want. But if the mother is going to say it's okay for the father to pick up on this Wednesday, you need to get it in writing. You need to get it in writing. You don't want the mother calls you and says, okay, the father can pick up on Wednesday, but no follow-up, nothing in writing. All right? Father shows up on Wednesday, takes the child, and you say, okay, fine. 20 minutes later, the mother shows up, says, where's my child? And you said, well, the father just picked up. You told me it was okay for the father to pick up. And the mother says, no, that was next Wednesday, not this Wednesday. Or, I was drinking. I don't know what I was saying to you on the phone. Or, I don't remember saying that. And now she's upset. And now she had all kinds of plans for this child. And she's really angry and making a complaint against you. And just, we don't want to we don't want to deal with that. So, send me a text. Send me a fax. I need something in writing before I'm going to allow a change in what the custody order says. Now what? Mother says, we're separated. Father lives on the other side of town. He's not involved in anything. There's no court agreement because we're just separated. Now what? A guy shows up 6 months later. You've never seen him before. The child runs to him. Daddy, Daddy. And he says, yeah, I'm the father. The mother said it's okay for me to pick up. Well, you don't know him. You don't know him. What are you going to do? Well, father, have a seat. Or I don't know who you are. Have a seat. I'm talking to the mother here. Whatever she says goes. Because you don't know who he is. He can't prove that he's the father. He says, I'm taking the child. You call the police. You call 911. It's that serious. You got to do it. So mother, when you tell me that the father you're separated and he lives across town, you need to know that if he ever shows up and I know who he is, maybe you do know who he is, he's going to be able to get the child. And if you don't like that, you need to go to court. Last comment about this. You're not a lawyer, so you don't want to be a lawyer. So, okay, you got the court order, but maybe it's not clear to you. And the father says one thing, oh yeah, I can do this. And the mother says, oh no, he can't. And both of them are claiming that that's what the court order says. And you don't know. You don't know. Or you just find yourself in the situation where the mother, I keep saying the father's the bad guy in this situation, but whoever, mother or the father shows up and you're just not sure. And you're just like, now what? The safest thing to do is just call the police. Seriously, just call the police. Providers do it all the time. And you say, I don't know who has the right to this child, and I'm concerned, and so please, can you send somebody over here to sort this out? And try to get a resolution that way. That's your safest bet. Okay. Privacy. Privacy. Parents these days have a high expectation of privacy. They don't want you sharing any information about their child, their family, with anybody else, right? We're increasingly concerned about our privacy. Therefore, you should be keeping confidential whatever the parents tell you and whatever you learn about their family. It's the professional thing to do. It's a good business practice. It can reduce the risk of a lawsuit. So, I think you want to have a privacy policy. And the privacy policy would say something like this. I, provider, will promise to keep everything about your family confidential unless I'm required to release it by law or you give me written permission. That's your policy. You're going to keep everything confidential unless you're required to release it. The police, licensing, child protection, the health department, okay, government could force you to release information. Or with your written permission. Otherwise, I'm not sharing anything. That's, I think, where you want to be. There are a lot of situations that deal with privacy. Are you posting pictures of children on your refrigerator or on the wall somewhere in your house? Well, when friends or neighbors come over to your house, they can see these pictures and see who's in your program. That's a privacy issue. A school counselor calls you up and says, we're doing an assessment of Sally Jones. It can be helpful to us if you can tell us a little bit about Sally Jones. No, I'm not saying anything until I get written permission from the mother that says I can talk to you. You overhear some information about a family's private situation, husband's in the hospital, mother's in alcohol treatment, whatever. Well, of course, you're not going to share any of that. Parent comes to you and says, my child just told me she was bit, or you tell the parent your child was bit today, and the parent says, I want to know who bit my child. Well, no, that's confidential. Here's how I'm handling biting. This is what I'm doing to deal with it. This is what the experts tell me how to deal with this. But no, it's not going to do anybody any good to tell you who bit your child because it's irrelevant. It's confidential. Parent says, well, I'm having a church bazaar and I want to invite the other families. Can you give me their email addresses? You say, no. You could say, if you print up a flyer, I'll stick the flyer in the kids' cubbies so the parents could see it, but I'm not going to share any information about those other families unless they're giving me permission. Now, your child could well hear information about other families, and so you want to do what you can to talk to your child, depending on the child's age, to try to keep that confidential. The point is, for these situations, permission, parent permission. So you want to put a child's picture up in your refrigerator? Fine. Just say to the parent, would you sign this that says I give permission to put this picture on your refrigerator? I mean, it may sound, like, oh man, Tom, this is going too far. But no. I think this is an issue. Now, this becomes particularly an issue on the internet, Facebook. Facebook is all about pictures. And you should never post a picture on Facebook without the written permission from parents. And I think putting a picture on Facebook is a whole different thing than just putting a picture on your refrigerator. Because there's not many people are going to see the refrigerator picture, but there could be millions of people who see the Facebook picture. And people can grab pictures off of the internet, off of Facebook, and post them somewhere else. So, if you're going to put pictures on the internet, on Facebook in particular, you want to say, parent gives permission to post this picture on my Facebook page, on Instagram, on Pinterest, on wherever, your website. Provider called me up and said, I took a picture of 3 kids in my care. One of the child's back was to the camera. You couldn't see your face. I got written permission from the other 2 parents for their kids, and I put it on my Facebook page. The next day, the parent of the child whose back was to the camera came to me and said, I did not give you permission to post my child's picture on your Facebook page. And the provider said to her, but your child was back to the camera. You can't see the child's face. And the mother said, I know who that child was. That's my child. So I think you got to be very sensitive to this. You got to bend over backwards about getting permission and watching out before you're posting pictures. You also want to be concerned about protecting your privacy. So whether you have a business Facebook page or a personal Facebook page, you want to be careful about what you're putting on your own Facebook page regarding your own family. So I wouldn't post pictures saying, just got back from Las Vegas this weekend. Boy, was I drunk the whole time. No, I don't think so. If you've got teenage kids and they got Facebook pages and they're posting crazy things on there, you may want to watch out because parents may see that. You should assume that parents are going to be looking at your Facebook page before they enroll their child and afterwards. So I would just be a little cautious about what you're putting up there about your family. Craigslist. You may want to advertise on Craigslist. Fine. You may be reluctant to share your address, your email, your phone number. I can understand that. There is a way to advertise on Craigslist without revealing that information. You know, on the west side, I'm the childcare provider on the west side, whatever. And parent would have to go through Craigslist to find you, and so you haven't shared that information publicly. The same idea with Google Maps. Google Maps is like an online business card you can get for your business. Maybe it's called Google Business rather than Google Maps, I forget. In any case, normally you can post, okay, here's my business, here's my contact information, and then it'll show a Google map and where your business is, where your home is. Oh, well, I don't want to show exactly where my home is, or I don't want to give away my phone number or my email. I don't want to be bombarded with crazy people. So, okay, you could still get that business card up there on the internet, and it'll just show your neighborhood, not your address. And again, they'll have to go through Google to get to you, and it's not so public. All right. One last thing, price fixing. Price fixing. This is a legal issue. If we were all together in a room, you're in a training group, you're in a conference, childcare conference, whatever, if you turned to the person next to you and said, well, what do you charge? It's probably against the law. It's illegal for competitors to discuss their rates. A competitor is somebody who lives close enough to you that a parent could choose one or the other of you. Now you're a competitor. You can't talk about rates. It's called price fixing. It's antitrust violation. It's a federal law. If you called up another provider who knows who you are, just on the phone, and said, hey, what do you charge? Or are you going to raise your rates this year? Illegal. If you belong to an association and they survey its members and then they share the results at your association meeting, that's illegal. Now, that's because competitors are sharing information about rates. And the reason that's illegal is because it would tend to allow providers, competitors to increase their rates. That's why you would talk to somebody else, right? So if the other person doesn't know that you're a competitor, it's not illegal. So you go to a childcare center, walk in, they don't know who you are, let's say, and you say, I'd like to know what your rates are. They give you a flyer or whatever. Okay, that's fine. They don't know you. If you call another provider on the phone who does not know you and say, what do you charge? That's okay. That's okay. So just be aware of that. Now, you do want to know what other people are charging. Well, how can you get great information? You can contact Child Care Resource and Referral, and whatever information they have about rates is public, because anybody can get that information, and they are not a competitor. So they're likely to be able to tell you or tell you where to go to get what's the average rate for infant, toddler, preschool care in your area, and so on. And you don't want to just mirror, you don't want to just say, oh, I just want to charge the average rate. But at least you can get some information. Whatever they can tell you, tell me everything about rates in my area. That's public. What else? You can ask the parents in your program, what do your friends pay for childcare? Ask people at church. Ask people you meet at the street, friends, neighbors. What do you pay for childcare? What do you hear from other people about what they pay for childcare? You can make your rates public. You can put your rates up on your Facebook page, on Craigslist, on your website. You can put a flashing neon sign in your front window that says what your rates are. That's okay. You can make your rates public. You just can't share them solely with people who are competitors. That's what I want to say. Covered a lot of stuff. Again, here's my contact information. Give me a call. Send me an email. I don't charge anything. Happy to try to answer your question. Again, my website has a lot of information. There's a whole section just on legal and insurance matters. Lots of different articles there. There's an insurance directory there. Facebook is a way people keep on top of what I'm writing about, and that's another place for questions. So, good luck. You work very hard. I know that talking about legal and insurance matters is probably not your favorite thing to think about. You'd rather be with kids. You'd probably not rather think about this stuff. But this stuff is important. It may not come back to bite you if you're not protecting yourself properly, but it can, and if it does, it can be very, very serious. So we want you to be around. We want you to be around longer, as long as you want, to provide good, high-quality care. And so I think you can manage. You can do the things that I've talked about. You may not be able to do them overnight, but you need to be aware of them. You can deal with it. You can get the insurance as necessary. You can certainly follow the rules about reducing your risks, knowing that you can't eliminate them, but that's okay. It's with this insurance primarily, you should be able to sleep at night. So, thanks again for listening. Goodbye.